It's Gerard Whateley. Thanks for listening to the podcast. In this episode, the grand final edition of On the Magnets with Justin Lepich. Demons defender Christian Salem joined me from Perth ahead of training. We found legendary Melbourne figure Ivor Warne-Smith's grandson in Sudan. The trade bell with Tom Morris and Andrew Voss from across the Melbourne-Sydney divide. You can get in touch at any time. Whateley at sen.com.au. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Good morning. So it won't be Clarko at Carlton. The idea for the past 6 weeks has been near on intoxicating. I can't tell you how many calls and messages I've had from people claiming to know for sure and certain that Alistair Clarkson would coach the Blues. There's a good few of you listening right now who will have sent that correspondence over the past 6 weeks. Vivid imaginations and wishful thinking, as it has turned out. It would have been one of the great appointments in my time covering the game. I was thinking back this morning, so maybe Lee Matthews to Brisbane, Malcolm Blight to St Kilda, Ross Lyon to Fremantle, Paul Roos to Melbourne. And I think it would have been rapidly successful. But it's not to be. It's not to be, as we learnt on 360 last night.
Is there any chance you'll coach Carlton next year?
No, listen, I spoke to Cookie over the weekend and I appreciated the call and enormously respectful of the process that they're going through, but I'm sticking to what I said 6 or 8 weeks ago, that I need a spell. I've only got 2 years. That's flat out or stop. I'm just not ready to go flat out again right now. I couldn't respect two clubs greater than Collingwood and Carlton in terms of and the lure to coach those clubs is right sitting there right in front of your face. Do you want to put your hand up to see whether you'd be selected to coach those sides? But it wasn't strong enough to overpower my thinking in terms of what my family and I need right now, and that's 12-month spell. Now, in that 12 months, I'm quite serious when I've said this throughout the course of the year, I might find out that I can't recharge the batteries and I don't want to go again, or I think probably it's in my DNA to want to coach again at the end of next year or the year after, but I want to use the next 12 months to try to find that out.
It makes Clarkson a fascinating study for the next 12 months, and he will cast quite a shadow while the idea of a return to coaching exists. And it has Michael Voss momentarily in the unenviable position where there's the broad assumption he's going to be appointed, but he's officially being told nothing more than he's in the last two. I hope it is. I think Vossi will make a great fist of it the next time around. And if we are going to open this back up, instead of discarding coaches so callously, Michael Voss is exactly the sort of coach who should get a second look at it after all the work that he's done since he departed the Brisbane Lions. Our Tuesdays start with On the Magnets. It's our final edition of On the Magnets. Justin Lepich, great to see you.
Hey, Gerard, how are you?
I'm well.
Where's the sad music?
What about the idea of Vossi to Carlton?
That's awesome. It'd be great for him. I mean, we've spoken about it a lot, and I know Brett Ratton now is back in the game, and it's terrific to see. If Michael is the man that gets back in. I haven't spoken to him. I only sort of had the news broken to me late last night. I haven't had a chance to get the inside word. Not that he'd give it to me, by the way. He's the most closed book of any of my friends out there. So he'd play very much a straight bat. But it'd be fantastic if he overall gets that job.
So thinking back on his course, he came to the Lions job sooner than he expected to. I might run through this a little bit later, but he was going to take the senior assistant's job at West Coast, and then circumstances changed. He did go in to succeed Lee Matthews. He did 5 years, got tipped out. He's done a 7-year full apprenticeship now. Outstanding work at Port Adelaide. Everyone at Port will tell you what an influence he has had. Would he be an infinitely better qualified coach now than he was 13 years ago?
Yeah, I would have thought so. I mean, I think also, too, luck has a bit to play in some of these things of when you're ready and what club you get and what you do. I think, Chris was only 3 years out of the game when he got Geelong, but he just went to a club that was just such a fully supportive club that understood the big picture. He's surrounded by just such, goodness around him that he's able to sort of guide their way through it. And, I guess, cut all the edges off Chris along the way as he's on the job. So that he had the beauty to be able to do that. Whereas some clubs you don't get that opportunity to do that, which would be similar to him early days at Brisbane. So now he's fully prepared. He knows every part of the business. He knows what's coming at him. So he'll be acutely aware. I don't think even all the past issues this year of Carlton are going to faze him all too much. I think he'll be able to work with those and slowly, bit by bit, get everyone back on page, which is what he's good at. He's a good standard setter as well. So he'll make the players better just in those things.
Does he have a presence about him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just having the name Michael Voss as a starting point. But, absolutely, he's got presence as well. And we heard Lee Matthews say sometimes that presence can be a negative in the modern-day coaching because, promotes almost a feeling of superiority, which kids don't sort of handle well nowadays. Whereas, if you can still be strong but also realise as well that, I still have to work together and give players what they want and show empathy and care. I think if you got that fine balance, you can still be that strong leader.
And so he will represent a group that Brett Ratton, hopefully, so it's not his yet, but hopefully Michael Voss is the coaches who get the second look at it, which we have been militantly exclusionary in footy, I think, in shutting down those who have had a look at it and haven't succeeded instantly.
Yeah, it is. It is hard because I think once you've already witnessed someone, I guess fail is in a term. What is success in footy? We've had this conversation many times. So what is it entirely? Michael did still take the Lions to a final series. Ironically, in his first year, when he was probably the worst of his coaching, it was in his first year. He was probably the worst coach he's ever been. He was the most successful. So sometimes even that, is timely in what team you have at what point. But yeah, why not? I mean, he's got done a bigger apprenticeship than most, really, if you even call it apprenticeship, because he's already had the main gig. So it's just a matter of whether they two want to marry each other. They want to get together and have the long-term walk down the aisle, because it's not as simple as, we're in this marriage for you to impress me. No, it's for us to work together. And that's just, as long as the club and the coach feel that connection together, I think all's good.
So we wait to see. We wait to see if that's how it pans out at Carlton. The bond that you have with premiership teammates, so this is in vogue this week. Obviously, the Bulldogs tasted it 5 years ago. Melbourne are searching for it the first time in 57 years. How real is the bond to the players that you shared your 3 premierships with? Oh,
it is. And I think ultimately, for I guess the big massive group that I played with are all very similar in age gap, really. But I think respects the mutual respect friendship is a unique one out there. So ACCA aside, you probably wouldn't see anyone criticise another member of that party. Over the course of time, we're really proud of what we're able to achieve in that group, and you really want to celebrate that as much as you can. It's ironically a 20-year reunion this year that we can't actually. We've tried 3 or 4 times to get something together, but we're going to have to wait another year. Luckily, we won 3 in a row, so we can actually just put it back another year for a few years. That's always fun. But no, I think that's it. And the times we do get to see each other. Obviously, I'm very close with Fly, and we've worked together a lot, and we're very close. And then see Vossi intermittently, and it was good to join Chris and Nige in the hub last year and spend some time with them. Have a couple of reds at night just to reignite that, because you do. Footy sometimes separates you as well. So, and it's great to have, and they are long-lasting friendships. But you'll argue that you'll have Richo sitting there saying that he's got Nathan Brown and, as and a lot of his players as well that he went through tough times with, that you get friendships out of. So everyone will probably say that.
How big a part of your footy journey is it that you are a premiership player?
Well, it's what you set out to do. I guess the challenge with it is that you can only do so much to become a premiership player, because you're reliant on a team of players around you and a team of support staff around you, and a club that's actually really well run. So in a lot of ways, you can influence it with your performance, but the best way to influence is how you can influence everybody else. I think that's probably the difference between premiership players or premiership leadership groups probably and everyone else, is that they don't just want to play well for themselves. They want to influence the wider group around them to come along with the journey. And I think that's what our group had probably at Brisbane, bigger than anything. It was a very strong group, very headstrong group. A lot of egos in that group, you could argue. So, but we're all on the same page with that.
What most vividly comes to mind with each of them. So the first premiership, 2001, you're tasting it for the first time. You're on the second half of that season was exceptional. Essendon were regarded as the standards. We know how you plotted the story along the way. What's the most vivid thing of 2001?
That was relief, I would have thought was it, because, you think about, being 10, 11, 12 years old in the backyard, dreaming of this day. So it's not something you just thought of when you started playing AFL football. It was the dream started as a kid, like everybody, and to even the thought of even get to AFL, to get the opportunity to then win it. It's pretty pie in the sky sort of stuff when you think about the first moment you thought about it, which is way back when in its infancy. So the relief of just going, I achieved that those guys, those heroes I looked up to have done. So there is a bit of shock in that as well. But that's more it. The relief part of it, and I can't believe it happened, is probably the big thing.
Then there's the thriller in the second year where you beat Collingwood. What most vividly comes to mind?
It's funny because that was our red hot year, 2002, the second season. We played what we thought was a lesser opposition that day in Collingwood. I think a lot of us stupidly walked away from that game a little disappointed. And that sounds odd, but we thought we should have won by 10 goals. We thought we were better than that. And I know personally I thought I had to kick myself out. You just want a flag. What are you doing? Because you just had to remind yourself, I didn't play well, and I know other guys wish the result had been better or they played better. So it was almost like you had to, the team won, but you had a bad day. So you kind of have to wrestle with that thought as well. But then you go, but the team winning got me something that we've been working through all year. So that was the interesting mental part to overcome that. I mean, it didn't take me long to get over it. About 10 beers later, I think we're all good. But yeah, it was an interesting dynamic of that thought afterwards.
So the third one is a thumping win against a side that had beaten you in the qualifying final. So in a way, it's the exact inverse of what you've just described.
Oh yeah, that's like winning lotto or getting the quaddie, I guess. It's really like that. It's like, what? It's never happens. Like, as far as like, it's a sort of thing that I'm a part of a team that not only just won once, but grew something that was quite huge. Like at that point in time, it's more common nowadays, but back in 2001, no one had done that for a very, very long period of time. So it was almost like this never happens. You got to go back to people that aren't even alive the last time this was actually achieved. So it was, and now we've seen it happen twice. Richmond didn't get all the way there, but Hawthorn were able to replicate it not long after. So I guess the system of the draft has probably enabled this possibility to happen more often, given the way the draft is manufactured.
And what does the lost mean to you, the losing the fourth one?
Obviously there's a lot of pain in any losing grand final. I mean, that's horrific. I try and I look back and there's a lot of angst even around that game, but given the lead-in, the fact that we lost the home prelim final to Geelong on it, and we played it on a Saturday night, and there's a lot of people at Brisbane are still a little bit upset about that we weren't giving the fairest opportunity to play that game, which I think is correct as well. We weren't given the fairest opportunity, but we didn't play well at the end of the day. And I probably kind of rationalise it in my head to say, if someone said to me at the start, okay, you're going to play in the next 4 grand finals and I'll give you 3. Are you going to take it? I'll probably go, all right. So I look at it like that, because anything could have happened in 2002, now that I'm at Collingwood, Anthony Rockers was a goal. It was straight through the middle. But anything like that those things could have happened to shape that particular game. So, you can't say in one hand we got bad luck here. We could have got it in many different ways. So, I tend to try and rationalise it that way.
And the medals themselves. So there is, the debate has reignited. Gerard Healy restarted the debate, really centred on Nathan Jones. I've always believed, I can't understand why we would exclude people from being part of the premiership glory, if you like, but that's we militantly hold to no, only the players get the medals. But what are the medals to you? Like when we use the example of the Super Bowl rings, it's imprecise because footballers wear their Super Bowl rings. They legit wear them around. I've never seen one of your brethren wearing a premiership medal, ever.
Well, imagine if you walked around the streets of Melbourne with wearing a premiership medallion. You'd look like what would there'd be a W word used.
Yes,
a lot of Melburnians would be used. But and imagine walking around with 3 of them. You'd have a sore neck. It's funny because I'll give you a bit of a bias story. And I told Basher Hooley after the second grand final win. Well, it was after the first grand final. He got his medal, and I said to him, mine looks very similar to that. It's almost identical, which they are. I said, but mine's got a lot of dents in it. And he goes, really? Why is that? I said, well, they cling together when you get a few of them. And after the second grand final, he had his in his bag, and he came up to me and he had the two. He goes, oh, they're bashing together, Lepo.
Brilliant.
So it's quite funny he remembered that. So that's a bit of a gag story that we told back then. I don't even know where we were. But anyway, the medals. But yeah, apart from in the you don't see them. They sit in the drawer, and they don't come out. But the best thing is the replica cups. So I got them from Brisbane, and also Richmond gave them out to the players and staff as well. So I've got 6 of those replica cups sitting up on my wife's piano there, and it's awesome just to have. That looks pretty cool. You can reflect on it. You look at it. You don't have to wear it. You don't have to show it around. But that's pretty cool. I mean, most people can buy them as well. I think supporters, but the ring's an interesting one because I don't know if I'd wear those big gaudy rings. Richmond did hand out rings to the coaches and players as well after they made their own. Trent Cotchin sort of drove that and gave that out. So that was a wonderful thing that they did.
Yeah. And yet, have you ever seen any of them wear them?
The Richmond players?
Yeah.
No. And they're not they're a bit more understated than the NFL Premiership rings, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that's the cultural difference between Australia and America is stitched in there somewhere as well.
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
Nice. Yeah, that's lovely.
There's less bling.
Only Kevin Murray is the one man we know who wears his Brownlow around, which is absolutely brilliant. He's such a lovely part of our culture. Morning, Jared. Please caution Leper on his 2002 Grand Final reminiscence. This one still sits rough with many Pies fans, and it could end up the shortest strategy coaching tenure in history. Regards, Darren from Blackburn. Very nice, Darren.
Sorry, Darren. Jared made me do it. I'm not talking about it ever again.
All right, let's play with these 2 grand finalists, shall we? And the twice that they've met this year, you've developed the formula for our final series. So let's go back, shall we, to round 11.
Okay, let's. That was the Etihad game, which is the Western Bulldogs home game. 87-59, 13-9, 8-11. This was Treloar's first game he missed through the injury for the Western Bulldogs. So I think this is the time where they're starting to find their feet a little bit with a few missed midfielders. Dogs had 7 of the top 8 possession gatherers on the day. So, they had plenty of the ball. They had 54 more disposals. So that wasn't an issue on the day. But Melbourne had 4 of the top 5 interceptors with Jake Lever sort of leading the way with 13. So he was huge. He's actually huge in both games, to be honest. We can touch on that in a minute. The Dogs actually had 6 more inside 50s on the night that Melbourne won, but their forward efficiency, and it was an issue in both games. It was a factor. It was only at 34%, whereas Melbourne went at 50% going inside 50. So that was a big difference on the night, just being efficient. As we thought, Melbourne won the hit-outs, but the Dogs won the clearances. Yes. So that is a bit of a theme in that. And Melbourne won the contested possession. In fact, they won them in both games. But the big difference here, Jared, is that the post-clearance contested possession, so they won that by 21. So if you think of a stoppage and the ball goes outside the stoppage, it's that ball. So it's almost a forward via back, or it's a wing via wing. It's not sort of that midfield via midfield sort of scrimmage and fight and scrap. That part was relatively even. It was everything on the outside of that. So, and that night, Melbourne kicked 7 goals too from front half turnovers, which was the big scoring source in the game, which means they got all their numbers. They choked the Western Bulldogs and they scored a big amount from the front half of their game. So that was pretty much how that one played out.
Round 19 when they met at the wet MCG.
It was a wet MCG day. Doggies more accurate that night, 13-7, 85. Melbourne 9-11, 65. So you're right, that was the wet night at the G. So Melbourne had 20 scoring shots that particular night, and so did the Dogs. So it's interesting when you have 2 teams with the same amount of scoring shots. You're trying to look at, okay, did we get the same amount of opportunities? What was it that made it the difference? Because the first game, the Dogs, as we mentioned, kicked 8-11. So they were inaccurate. They had 19 shots, and then Melbourne had 21. So, in fact, both teams had a similar amount of scoring shots in both games when they've played. Again, the Dogs had 7 of the top 10 possession gatherers, so that they'll get the ball, and which means nothing's going to change there. In both games, McRae and Oliver, the 1 and 2 disposal players on the ground, and then the rest was all Western Bulldogs players. The second game was a bit different, where the disposals were actually similar. So the Dogs actually had less of the ball than the previous game and won. So that was a real difference in the two. But the inside 50 efficiency, there wasn't a lot of difference. The Dogs still went at 39%. So in both games, they've struggled to be highly efficient inside their forward 50 against Melbourne. massive stat, this one. The actual Dogs won the free kicks that night 25-11.
Yep.
And then that wet night. So that can play a huge part, particularly in wet games. That's a contested possession, every one of those free kicks. So you've got to, tidy that part of the game up. And again, Melbourne won the contested possession plus 23. Again, plus 20 on the post, on the outside of the clearance. They won the contested possession. So that will be the differential, I think, in the game. Again, the hit-outs dominated by Melbourne, 67-18. This is without Steph Martin there. So this is going to be a massive difference, or the big difference in the two games coming this week. Melbourne kicked 4 goals 5 from front half turnover. I said last time they kicked 7 goals 2 in the other game. Yep. They kicked 4 goals 5. So both 9 shots. Both times. So expect that to probably happen again. It's just how accurate you are often from a certain part of your game. And then Josh Shackey played his first game back, but he played defence. That was his first game. He played defence, and he played on Jackson. They tried him there in that particular role in round 19. So that was the wet game over there. So in overall, if you put the consistent themes together, the things that poked out in both games, so 39 shots to 41. So expect an 11-goal 10 to 10-goal 10 sort of game. That should be, if you're going on a bit of history, it should be a 20-shot each sort of game. Whichever way that. Expect McRae and Oliver to get as much ball as they want, because in both games they just were left alone to just amass it. So unless someone does something completely different, that will happen again. The Dogs inside 50, both games were poor, as in the 30s, so that might continue to be an issue. It might be something that Luke Beveridge needs to look at if it goes back in the same way. And looking at the contested possession count, you'd think Melbourne are going to win it on the outside again, plus 15 or more with that, given the fact that that's been the consistent theme of what's happened through the last couple of times they've played. The big difference, though, is the Steph Martin factor, which can change a lot of these numbers, because it definitely might change the hit-out number, but it also might change a few other things and the confidence of what the mids have inside, because it definitely changed what we expected last week with Steph Martin being there.
And Melbourne will have shots from their front half turnovers.
Yes, they'll get 9 or 10 shots from their front half, because they're good. That's their defensive DNA. They'll try and everyone wants to score on the first turn, so don't worry about that. They'll hopefully score on the first turn, but they're good at scoring on the second turn if they don't quite get it done. If Western Bulldogs win it back, they're good at pinning them in and making they get another shot. So I think the Dogs' advantage, though, is Steph's back. I think that's it, and we just spoke about that briefly. He'll help those contested ball numbers. And the Dogs will make Melbourne defend them really hard. So that high handball game, so Melbourne will have to be at their defensive best in close. Their tackle, their hit-in pressure has to be as good as it's going to be, because Western Bulldogs will try and weave their way through you and trying to get a really clean inside 50 look with a Bont running through with open space. They don't like to kick over hands inside 50. They like to be in open grass coming inside 50. So to do that, you have to, at the source, challenge the midfielders with handball in an inventive way. So they'll definitely do that and make sure Melbourne's defending really well, which they didn't do on the first night, because the second game, one thing I failed to mention, which this is going to fail to go into Melbourne's advantage, in the round 19 game, the Dogs actually kicked 6 goals won from forward 50 stoppages. That is a crazy number. Yep. So 6 goals won out of their 13-7 from stoppages in your forward 50. That's just an insane number. You might get a goal a game out of something like that. So that's, if you're a Melbourne supporter, you think, well, we just a bit of concentration and a bit of that, a bit of concentration around the stoppage, we can fix that sort of number. It was a really lethargic performance by Melbourne in watching it back when I watched it the other night. And the other thing, Melbourne advantage is their defence and their interceptors. So that's where you might see some of the magnets come into play to stop Melbourne's interceptors and their defensive players. The one thing I'm not sure about from both teams is health. Who is in the best possible space? It's so much debate, because if you had a ledger between, we've spoken about the fine line between rest and rust. Now, rust comes in many forms. Now, you could be rusty because haven't had enough match play to get to, the pinnacle of where you want to be. But then again, you might have had too much rest and you've come back down to rust, and that is the challenge that we're unsure of, because 2 weeks ago we're sitting here saying Melbourne are the most primed. And then after, now that the Bulldogs have gone through their all the things that can promote rust, a bit of travel, bit of fatigue, and also players coming back from injury. And now Treloar's had enough games back, Dunkley has, Steph Martin's got a run in him, and they've got an extra 2 weeks to rest that team with no travel. They come to the starting blocks as equal, if not, you go maybe a little bit more match hardened. So that part has just almost swung on its head. So that has changed that whole thought process for me from 2 weeks ago.
And the spirit and psychology around the dogs, is that a factor?
That's the one. I mean, Luke Beveridge has played on that the whole time. But mind you, I think Melbourne have got their own spirit game going as well. And that would be the difference between the two. Goody's got his, almost the feel like we are the team destined to win this. He's almost convinced his players that this is our destiny. Whereas Bevo's spirit and psychology is more based around us versus them mentality, and we've done this before, and we're the underdogs, and we can do it from the back half of the four. So his is more come from that angle, but both have something like that at play.
So when you tie all of that together, have you landed somewhere?
I've landed to Melbourne in overtime.
Oh, beautiful.
well, they're all going to have 20 shots. See something. This is the greatest chance of a grand final going to a draw, unless something catastrophic happens and one team just really gives up the ghost and has a terrible day, or one team or the other option is accuracy. As we know, one team's extremely accurate, one team is extremely not, which can happen as well.
Oh, it'll be a good broadcast to be part of if it's overtime, won't it?
I think I'm just praying for that part of it.
So, the whiteboard, the magnets. What would you like to do with the grand final magnets, Lepper? Where do you want to draw our attention?
Oh, let's go to a few of the matchups that we think might happen on the day. I think this one's a good chance, which is Josh Shackey to go to Jake Lever, which he did really well at Lear. Lear still had a bit of an influence last week, but Josh also, I think, played some of his better footy in just marking the ball, and it was a good starting point for him. The one difference, and if you want to give Josh any advice, is go watch some of Jacob Townsend's vision from 2017 that he did the same job on him in the grand final. That was and Jacob was one who obviously would have come from a different bent. He wouldn't have been just playing from the back shoulder and all about technique. He literally physically got in to him as well, to Jake. So that would be a good starting point. It sort of defies his personality a little bit, doesn't it, to do that?
So what does that look like in a game?
Oh, what it is often playing behind, being physical, and keeping hand contact, so that's the important stuff. Keeping the player off balance as much as you can. It doesn't mean doing anything reckless or outside the rules, but it's just making sure he can't get a free run at the ball, which is what he likes. We just spoke about the 2 games he's played, 13 intercepts and 15 intercepts. That is a big problem for the Western Bulldogs, and will be a problem this week if they continue that going.
Yep. So go study Townsend on Lever.
Yeah.
The history's a good guide.
Alex Keith will be back in the team, you'd imagine, for Ben Brown. It's a shame. I'm not sure. Maybe it's Cordy that exits, but so that'll be the other interesting matchup for me, because Ben Brown's going to have to. One thing he's done really well is just a few times he did this last week is go up with one hand and bring the ball to ground. And I've loved that evolution of his game, and people might think that's a little strange, but we saw Ben Brown in the past when he was at North Melbourne. If he didn't mark it, he'd get fed under the ball and get marked against. So that's the all duck, no dinner approach. So I think one thing he's grown into his game is to make sure Keith can't mark the ball. So make sure at least the ones he can't win, he's got to know that, if I'm getting under the football here, I've got a decision. I can go for broke, or I can plant my feet and drop back and get one arm up and make sure Keith can't mark it, which will bring in now Cozzy Pickett and all those sorts of plays to come into play. So I think that's been the maturity of Ben Brown, and I'm looking forward to see him continue that part of it, making good decisions on knowing when to mark the ball, but more importantly, when to get another opportunity, when to bring it to ground and go, if it's at the ground, we've got Cozzy Pickett, and if Cozzy doesn't get it, if they pick it up, Cozzy will probably tackle them. So it'll give us another opportunity. So there's no loss in bringing it to ground. I think it's something Charlie Dixon's done really well at Port, but it's a really common thread now in key forwards in the game.
Yep.
I think Waitman will come back in, and unfortunately it's probably Scott and JJ back as the sub. That's the most likely, but he's going to be a really important player, I think, because I think one thing that we saw a few times, Rivers a few times in the final last week, held a few times. He was the one that looked a little shaky. So I think Waitman's influence down there could give him that little sting as well. It's going to be very difficult for their keys to take a lot of marks given the talent of Lever and May. So there's going to be more weight on the ground level.
Yep.
And I thought all of the ground level Dogs players were amazing last week. Even Rourke Smith playing a role in that as well. Even just their role players I thought did a really good job. But Johannesson played that role as well last week. So they've got some really good role players in that role, but he's the one that can potentially, with Bailey Smith, who's that half forward that goes up to the midfield that comes back to goal. So that's how he gets his goals, because he makes you think he's a midfielder, but then really he comes back and he's all on his own. So that's going to be a real important part of it. And the last part for me, and it's not a magnet so much from an individual. Well, these are individual matchups as Max Gawn, but it's how you deal with the Max Gawn threat. There's a theory that went around a year or two ago that Port Adelaide did, where they just got lots of hits on him. They were pretty aggressive that day in doing that, but what does hits mean? Hits is just really stopping your run as much as you can. If you've got to constantly restart yourself, you start running, little bump, got to restart again, bump, little start, rerun, or you're on the ground, someone just a little push down, get back up again. So you have to get up and down off the ground or restart your run. It's just frustrating and tiresome. And over the course of 4 quarters, that's where those sorts of strategies can wear down a particular player. I'm just interested to see whether they go with something like that. That's not in your face, it's not violent, but it's just restrictive and makes it hard for Max to get his dominance that he wants.
Brilliant. So those are the key magnets for the grand final. It is an enticing prospect, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I can't wait. It's going to be a great game.
A closing word on the Brownlow, shall we? So we were having this conversation on Crunch Time on Saturday. We did pose the over-under what would happen with the All-Australian defenders. And they were well represented, 31 votes. Just by way of comparison, we picked the Herald Sun, there were 39 votes. So Lever 5, May 1, Stewart 9, Dale 3, Aaliyah 7 and Rich 6. But the stunning concentration of votes on those key group of players. What do you make of it?
Well, I think the way any system operates, even the coaching system, the coaches award, whenever you have to hand out a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you think about the separation of votes you're giving. So, obviously the gap between 2 votes and 4 votes, is double. So it's actually quite a high percentage difference. Whereas the ones that do it well is the best and fairest count is definitely the one that actually evens out your performances. So Dylan Grimes won Richmond's this year, and then Jaden Short won last year, so 2 defenders. So you go, well, heck, but if you looked at it on Brownlow perspective, there would have been a gulf between Dylan Grimes or Jaden Short and Dustin Martin last year. There would have been a gulf of maybe 30 votes, or 3,000% or whatever it is. So so you're looking at that percentage gap. How do you do it? Well, what do you do is you individually grade games, and that's almost an impossible way to do it. So how do you grade a game? So if, Jared, you're playing forward pocket, I assume, Jerry. What was that? What was your key position?
Wide out.
Wide out forward pocket. And you kick 3 or 4, as a small forward pocket, and your defender doesn't do a lot, you might get a 4 out of 5, But then again, as a midfielder, you're going up against a Clayton Oliver. You're taking your performance and your role, what you're supposed to be played against your opposition. He might be a 4 out of 5. So you both end up with the same vote. So that's how the best and fairest differs between all the other awards. So what you're asking is, should we go in closer to that system? And how is that even possible to do? And what mechanisms can be in place? Because the best and fairest is the only one that probably evenly rewards all aspects of the game evenly. Because I think the ranking system, whether it's a 3-2-1 or a 5-4-3-2-1, we tend to lean to the best mid or 2 from both teams. And then maybe the best defender, unless they've had a breakout game, which Tom Stewart and Aaliyah did a few times, it was just clearly they were the best player, which even the Brownlow recognised. But otherwise, if it's line ball, you're going to get the best mid getting a 3 and the best defender probably getting a none, a 0 potentially. So
it's unachievable in a designated set of votes, as opposed to every player can get out of 5.
Yes.
That happens in the best and fairest. This is not a new problem, is it? There was a day was it 2000?
Oh, you're not bringing this up.
I am. So Wayne Carey and Justin Lepich played on each other. And both had fairly sterling days, and yet I scoured the history of the Brownlow, and there's no evidence of it.
No, he had a good Wayne kicked 5, and had 20 touches, which you think is pretty good for a centre half forward on the day. Didn't get a vote, and I had 20 touches myself and kicked 4 from centre half back.
4 from centre half back.
That's right, and neither of us got a vote, and 2 mids got it. And I thought from that day, because I actually was intrigued. I wonder how the umpires would see this, but in their eyes, they said we cancelled each other out. So, which is okay.
And midfielders who either played against nobody or
right.
they didn't cancel each other out.
That's right, and that's the other thing too. So the Brownlow doesn't reward defence. So now that there's less tagging and less one-on-one matchups in the game, and there's more, particularly in the midfield area against area, you get more opportunity to have more ball on your own. So it's more numbers in the game now. So there's more touches in the game. So there's a more chance of the bigger numbers going to the guys that get the bigger numbers. Thanks for bringing that up too, Jared.
Lever, great Tuesdays on the Magnus has been terrific fun.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you. See you Saturday for Crunch Time.
See you then.
Justin Lepich rounds out his work on a Tuesday. Dan from Port has texted through, for all non-Collingwood supporters, you're going to be missed next year. Leper, has been great listening to your knowledge and humour this year. Much respect. So we send Leper out on that note. We are trying to stay connected to events across the country. So 10 minutes before he's got to walk onto the bus to go to training this morning, Christian Salem from inside the D's camp. Christian, it's great to have you on SEN.
Thanks for having me, Jared.
So tell me this, does it feel like grand final week? Knowing that you haven't experienced before, but does it feel like it?
Yeah, it does. It's definitely the longer build-up, which is a bit different. But, the buzz over here is pretty crazy, and I can only imagine what it's like in Melbourne.
Does it feel like you've done a bit of waiting around already?
It hasn't been too bad considering we did this pre-Geelong. We obviously had the week off, so we're in a sort of similar routine. But, since yesterday, it started to ramp up pretty quickly, being back in the normal schedule.
So what does life look like? What are you able to do outside of the football commitments?
Yeah, well, now we're out of quarantine. We can pretty much do whatever we want. Restaurants, cafes are all open over here. So a few boys have been going out for breakfast, jumping in the beach for recovery. So it's at the same time, it's been pretty cruisy in terms of we've been training and just focusing on recovery and just getting ourselves ready.
Do you feel ready personally? How much are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Obviously, it's still 4 or 5 days away, but at the moment, it's more excited than nervous. It's going to be a great week, and all the boys are looking forward to it.
So there's a lot of red and blue flying back home, Christian, and your brothers seem to be right at the forefront of that. There was at the Point restaurant in the North Point. How much have you seen of what they've been up to?
Yeah, I have. I've seen a bit going on there. It's been great. Not only them, but the whole community around there back in Melbourne have got around us, and we've been drip feeded stuff, whether it's houses being painted, stuff being put up on fences, and it's the support's been incredible.
So how far have the brothers gone?
Yeah, they've painted. So obviously got the 2 restaurants. They've painted them red and blue, and they've put up some photos that some of the boys from the club have sent through. So they've been helped out there.
It's good fun, isn't it? It's a whole family experience, even when they're detached from it.
Absolutely, it's been great, and the buzz around the restaurants have been good too. People have been coming past for photos and whatnot, and it's just good that they're enjoying the week back home in a pretty tough time.
What's your grand final experience been like through underage competitions and the like, Christian? Have you seen one before?
I've had a couple, club football and then Vic Metro, but so I've probably 2 or 3, I reckon, over my time.
Have you won them?
Yeah, 3 from 3, I think, which is
Nice.
Handy. So hopefully we can keep it rolling.
Do they stick in your memory as excitable days?
Yeah, there was a couple of good games. Club footy was always great, playing with the mates. So it was good to get a couple back there.
Christian, what was Saturday night's session like? Was it everything that you wanted from it?
Yeah, it was, absolutely. We, like I said earlier, we had that opportunity to prepare the week leading into Geelong. We did a similar sort of setup, and it's a bit of a unique situation having a game in a month, but we embraced it. We went pretty hard. We did a couple quarters and obviously some other kicking drills and whatnot, but everyone bought in and went at it in a way where we're not going over the top, but we got the working that we needed to get done.
So there was a great debate back here, Christian, around, and it is because of the lull. What percentage of intensity would you have gone at?
Look, to be honest, we had a contest block where that was full on 100%. We do that throughout the season, and the match sim was pretty much fully at it, except you just got to be smart. You don't want to be slinging people, jumping into people's backs and whatnot. But other than that, we want to practice our game style as best we can and give it as match-like intensity as we can.
So obviously, Charlie Spargo is much reported now as he jarred the ankle during it. Is that so? There is an inherent risk to doing that. Is it a little bit of hold your breath but need to do it?
I guess at times, it's like that in any situation when it comes to this sort of stuff. But that happens throughout the year at training, little knocks and bruises. And Charlie's fine. It was just like you said, more of a jarred ankle. And I think he's training today, so he'll be sweet.
Yeah, that's good to hear. The strategy side of things, Christian, what sort of meetings are you having during the week leading up. So what is it? It's Tuesday morning. Have you started any of that work with the unusual 2-week block?
Yeah, we sort of started on Saturday in terms of, yesterday. I'm losing track of the days already. Yesterday we started just with review and leading into like oppo reports and whatnot. And we're just trying to make it as normal as possible. There's obviously going to be distractions, but yesterday we just started to ramp it up.
Do you get right into that strategy side of things? Does that appeal to you?
Yeah, obviously it's you play a number of teams over the years, and we're lucky to play the Bulldogs twice or 3 times, including a practice match. So, it's our boys do a lot of work, but we know as well as players what needs to be done and sort of how they play and set up. So it's just the start of a long week in terms of that sort of stuff.
Grand final experience. So Mark Williams brings so much of that as a coach, one of the famous flags. What's he been like? Has he delivered anything unusual yet?
He's I think he did a presentation last week to a few of the younger boys just about his grand final experiences and how he went about it in his journey. So from what I heard, that was pretty special, but he's great to have around just to bounce questions off, and obviously he's been through what the week looks like and distractions and all that sort of stuff. So it's been good to bounce some stuff off him.
Do you want to know much about grand finals, or do you just want to walk into it and experience it for the first time for yourself?
I'm probably more that side of it. Just sort of walk into it and experience it. And obviously it's a bit of a different prep in terms of specifically game day. Like the schedule changes a little bit with not presentations, with concerts and whatnot before the game. So you just got to be prepared for that as best you can. And other than that, just to try and make it as normal as possible, and not overthink it and just simplify it.
Will you get nervous?
I'm more the excited type than nervous. It's just it is what it is. There's always going to be nerves, but yeah, I'm more excited for it, and I'm looking forward to get into it.
So it's your 8th season, 26 years of age. Does it feel like a long journey within the AFL to get to this moment?
Yeah, it does. It's long and quick at the same time. It felt like yesterday I debuted, but at the same time when I got to the club, it was the first year of Roosie, so it was a bit of a rebuild, and it's been a long journey in terms of that. A lot of ups and downs, and to be where we are now, I couldn't be prouder of the club and the boys. Yeah,
so that I guess that's a beautiful 8 years to live, isn't it? If that is the point that this gets measured back to, is you're there at ground zero.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something I'm proud of, and I wouldn't change a thing. It's been a tough journey, not only for the club but the fans too. And previously to me being there is some more pain, and you can see that from speaking to Demon supporters. And now we're just sort of trying to repay the faith and make them proud. And obviously there's still one more game left, and hopefully we can finish off the job.
They're feeling that's for sure as we sample it every day here. So just as we conclude, when do you get told? When's your oppo session? When do you get told who you'll be responsible for from the Dogs?
Yeah, sort of more later in the week when we go through structure stuff. Yesterday it was more about the types of way they want to play. So probably Wednesday, Thursday, we'll ramp it up quite a bit and lead into the game.
Do you have a fair idea, having played against them twice this year?
Yeah, I think so. All the boys have a fair idea. It's, it is what it is, and you just got to get your head around it.
Christian, good luck with the preparations. You're due on the bus. Don't be late. Go well over the next few days, and we'll see you in action on Saturday night.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good on you. Christian Salem there from the Demons. So the build-up on the other side of the country as the D's head to training on a Tuesday. So it's all maintenance from here and the preparations for the big one. Ivor Warne-Smith, almost a ghostly name in the history of Australian football, takes us back to the early 1900s, to the days of the First World War, to Brownlow medals in the mid and late 1920s. He's a member of the Australian Football Hall of Fame. So Melbourne royalty by every measure, having been a captain and a member of the team of the century. So how far could we reach to find the Demons faithful in this grand final week? We've never had cause to ring Sudan before, but that's where we found Mark Warne-Smith. So let's find out how and why and indeed who. Mark, it's great to have you on the program. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Jared.
Mark, I have
Very excited where I am right now.
I have two foundation questions for you and then all manner of follow-up. The first is, where does Ivor Warner Smith sit in the family tree?
So Ivor is my grandfather, my father's father.
And a legendary figure in your family?
An icon, the paterfamilias that we all look up to, and all of my brothers and I have tried to strive to emulate whenever we play sports. We're a completely sports mad family, and the white line fever runs fiercely in my clan.
The second foundation question, Mark, is where will you be when you watch the 2021 Grand Final?
So I'm in Sudan. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going down the Nile this week to a place called Damazine. It's a Blue Nile state. It's on the border of Ethiopia, where we're dealing with refugees coming over from the conflict in Ethiopia in the Tigray region. If I do not travel down the Nile, I will be in Khartoum with the Deputy Ambassador from South Africa, who I've managed to suck into the Melbourne bandwagon. He's a bit of a sports nut, and we'll watch it at his house with about 3 different internet routers stacked up, ready to go to make sure we have bandwidth to watch the game.
Let's pull at both of those threads, shall we? Because this is a fascinating tale. Mark, what line of work takes you to that part of the world?
So I work, Jared, I work with the UN World Food Programme. It's the largest humanitarian organisation in the UN. We have about 83 operations around the world. Currently, I'm in Sudan as the ops manager. We have about 9 million food insecure people here in Sudan. Although it must be said that this is a very friendly country, friendliest I've worked in. Amazing sense of hospitality, but there are some challenges. So my job is to negotiate access to humanitarian aid with whoever is in charge locally. Sometimes these people are on watch lists. Hopefully they're not. Just so that people who've had shocks have access to food or nutrition, that we can sustain livelihoods during or after a crisis. We also look into nutrition and development, school feeding, programs that encourage girls and boys to go to school, that sort of thing. I've been doing this since 2006. Lebanon 2006 was when I joined the UN.
It does rather put into perspective that I sit around all day and talk footy, Mark.
I think I do too, Jared, at the moment. I'm not really getting much work out of me during workouts. There's a lot of content. I have to thank the club big time for the amount of content they've been able to generate for the fans over the last 2 weeks. It has been hoovered up at this end.
Do you find the work inspiring or troubling? How do you rationalise what you've seen firsthand over the past 15 years?
I'm a pretty task-orientated person, and I really love my job. There's a lot of challenges. I've worked in some pretty grim places and probably seen some pretty rough things, but at the end of the day, we could talk for the next 2 hours about corruption and troubles and problems, and that's not that interesting, but you get to see the food's gone from A to B. And it can be pretty humbling to turn up at a remote school and you'll have 800 kids sing a song for you because they see you as a part of the organisation that brought the food. And no matter how small the role I played and how big the team was that made it happen, just that sense of satisfaction seeing people incredibly happy about having something to eat, or you go to a school and you see girls being able to participate in an education, or nutrition where kids are literally on death's door and you get to make a difference. Now, many things go wrong. It doesn't always work, but I'm a great believer in having a go. And, I've loved my job. Been to Lebanon, East Timor, Kenya, Ethiopia, Sierra Leone. Was in Ukraine when the plane crashed, South Sudan, PNG, the Caribbean for hurricanes, Ebola in Sierra Leone. And for all the challenges, you still get a very immediate and satisfying result. You can see an effect. So I'm pretty motivated by my job.
Yeah, remarkable. How How tangible a link to home is footy and staying connected to the endeavours of the Melbourne Football Club?
Well, I'm a bit of an idealist. So apart from obviously calls to family and WhatsApp and chats with friends, AFL's the principal way I sort of feel Australian. I always loved it as a game. I was born into it. I was brought up with it. I was not given any choice in what sport was. But when I look at Australia, I have a rosy view of Australia from where I am now. It looks wonderful, and I laugh at the problems of politicians and stuff when I work where I work. But the thing that really stands out for Australia is the AFL's matured on social issues, and I take great pride in it, even though that sounds a bit over the top. Having worked in many places that are pretty grim, as I said before, lots of conflict, and I see Australian rules and our approach to sport in general as a thread that gives a positive sense of identity, and I think that's really good for communities. And I love all of it. AFLW, the way it's taken on racism, MND. I feel like the Demons have been leaders in that space as well. Even when I show people football, playing YouTube videos, which I've done to about 50 different nationalities about why AFL is the best thing in sport, I'll show them the inaugural AFW, the ad with Nathan Jones holding his daughter, talking about watching our daughters play. I see AFL as something that's growing with Australia, and it's one of the things I'm very proud of.
Do you carry a Sharon with you?
I've actually given them all away.
Right.
I actually have a funny story about that. Chris Connolly, shortly before and I'm sorry to bring it up, the Energy Watch saga, was handing out a whole lot of Energy Watch labelled footies, because obviously they didn't have much use for them in Melbourne anymore. So I brought them all over to Africa and gave them away, mainly in Kenya, where I've been trying to get people away from football and into AFL. I think we should be recruiting in Sudan as well. Some of the clubs I play at here, the athletic ability is phenomenal. But no, I don't have a Sharon at the moment, is the short answer.
There must be something to be done about that.
I do have a Demons top.
When does it come out?
Well, I have two. I have the match day jersey I wear when I'm watching and behave like a loon, and then I have a training top that I wear every time we win. I go for a run. It just about kills me. It's 36 degrees, stinking hot, but I take quite a lot of pride going for sort of like a post-match jog or run after. So yeah, a couple of bits of kit. There's every chance I'll be wearing the top all next week, including with visiting European delegations.
What a sight you'll be. So Ivor Warne-Smith is a ghostly figure in the game's past. It's a name that is passed from generation to generation, and a couple of days on from the Brownlow, it's never more relevant than now, and with Melbourne heading to a grand final. What do you know about your grandfather?
My grandfather was a very stern player. I grew up in Mount Martha in his summer house. So he was considered a gentleman, but pretty serious on the field. He and Norm Smith used to argue in our lounge room about team selection during the 50s. So he was chairman of selectors, and he was considered a calming touch on Norm's ferocity. Although I was given to understand by my grandmother that it did become willing, including one player, and I was really trying to remember his name for this story, that would continually run off to even up and was told he would not get a gig if he kept doing that. And Norm and grandfather, as I said, it came willing. I think Ivor's other principal function during the 50s was to give Norm a shot of scotch from his hip flask. The plan being upended in the 55 grand final when a Collingwood supporter reached through the fence and lifted his hip flask out of his trench coat pocket. This infuriated Ivor, and he turned around and, in a rather futile gesture, challenged the unknown thief to return it. Obviously, not getting much traction with that approach, but it was like he was a stern player, and then he was a bit of a soft touch as a coach, but he teamed up very well with three other gentlemen. So there was a bit of a brains trust at the club during the 50s, and I was always given to understand that the collegial approach with Norm was a big part of the stability during the 50s. Whether that's true or not, I wasn't there. But,
Yep.
Was always how it was explained to me by Grandma, the approach to team selection. And in the Team of the Century function that Melbourne had, I was very lucky to meet a lot of players from the 50s, some of who are sadly not with us now, and was really chuffed to be regaled with stories by them of Ivor and just how he'd taken them under their wing when they came to the club.
He's a remarkable figure in history, having served at Gallipoli and on the Western Front, and then having won 2 Brownlow medals. Are there treasures from his days that have been passed to your generation and the next?
Well, as has been written about a couple of times, the Brownlows were lost. We have his medals from the wars. He went to World War One with 2 brothers. He was 16 when he took charge of a machine gun post in Gallipoli. Came back a lieutenant with half a lung missing from gas in France, lost 2 brothers, and then insisted on joining the Second World War when he was too old. Like I said, a rather stern figure. Yep. I like to think I've got a bit softer. Each generation's calmed down a bit since. But most of the memorabilia is just we've got the 1955 coin that was used in the toss. Yep. I have 4 brothers, so we all have to take turns holding it. That's probably the most treasured artefact that we have.
Yep. Beautiful, beautiful stories. Tell me, have you let your mind run to what it would mean if Melbourne wins this premiership and breaks the drought?
Oh, of course I have, Jared. Yep. Absolutely. 2018, I was in Rome. I was planning a skinny dip in the Trevi Fountain, but that ended. As we know, I was quite willing to take on the €500 fine. A lot of people have a similar idea for various reasons in Rome. But, a skinny dip in the Nile probably not be so conducive to my health. I think I might invest in a bottle of scotch from either Max Gawn or Nathan Jones' birth year and toast every player on the list, the coaches, the administration. In fact, I might need both years if I think about it. I need to start a GoFundMe page for the Sullivan's Cove. But yeah, I'd also like to put it out there that if we do get up, I think someone in Melbourne should be painting a full-length Max Gawn mural on the Nilex silos by the Yarra.
That's a brilliant idea. Mark, we've never had cause to call Sudan before, and you might be in the most far-flung corner for a Demon fan to watch this grand final on Saturday night. I wish you nothing but the best for it, and thanks for sharing yours and the family story today.
Thanks for your time and your kindness, Jared. Appreciate it. And lots of love to my family in Australia. My brother and his nephew are in WA. They will be at the match, so there will be some Warren Smiths there.
Will you be able to? Will they send you photos and the like, or what sort of level of communication will you be able to have?
My older brother is a Luddite when it comes to technology, but I'm putting all my faith in my nephew, and under strict instructions. My niece, my brother's niece, who's in Melbourne, was set up for the ticket members drop,
Yep.
And within 7 seconds or something, she got it. She was 100 or something in the queue when the ticket drop went. My brother, her father, and she insisted that she'd be the best one in the family to try and get the tickets.
Yep.
And she was correct. My brother did it at the same time with his laptop, and he was like number 4,000.
Yes.
So something about my teenage niece's fingers was very nimble at securing the tickets, and they got sent off to our family in Perth.
Brilliant. Mark, enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jared. Bye.
Mark Warren Smith, so the grandson of Ivor Warren Smith, and in all likelihood he'll be watching the grand final in Demazin in the Blue Nile state, so on the border of Ethiopia with those fleeing for humanitarian reasons. it does give a little bit of perspective to our daily pursuits, doesn't it? So a few messages on that front and a bit of a challenge. If you know a Dogs fan in some far-flung corner of the world, potentially doing great things, meaningful things, who'll be obsessed with the grand final on Saturday night, you might email me and put us in touch, waitley@sen.com.au. But I feel quite content with that. Grandson of a dual Brownlow medalist in Sudan, having worked in some of the most troubled regions of the world over the past 15 years, and the Melbourne obsession which gets him through. We've contracted out the trade bell today. Sam Edmonds having the week off. Fox Footy senior AFL reporter Tom Morris has accepted the invitation. This is not my space. When I dabble, I tend to meddle. It's much better to have those who know what they're talking about. Tom, great to have you on board.
Jared, it's great to be here. Sam Edmonds does such a good job, and it gives me shivers when I hear this trade bell most mornings, but it's good to fill in for him.
So we've got some great suggestions, some new, and some are after a second opinion. Some are unsatisfied with Sam's input on a couple of these. They want to run a... So I'll give you an example.
Yep.
All right? As soon as we ring the trade bell, we get Tom Green to Richmond or Tom Green to Richmond. Either a question mark or an exclamation mark. Sam's a bit unsure about that one. What have you got to offer on Tom Green to Richmond?
Well, I'm only as sure as what people tell me, and that is that he won't be going to Richmond. You can't be certain, but he's contracted. The Giants aren't going to let him go. He's staying at the Giants.
Bless those who text it through every time. It does provide a smile. Now, a couple of veterans as we get started here. Scott Pendlebury as a starting point.
Yeah, so there's been a shift from Collingwood, so they're prepared to offer him 2 years now, which is what he wanted, and people I speak to believe that's a formality, and the same for Jack Zeeble at North Melbourne, who wanted 2 years. The initial offer was 1 year. They've now offered 2 years, so I think that's going to get done as well. So good news for North fans and Collingwood fans that wanted to keep those two players.
Damien Hardwick was with us on 360 last night. I really did like his approach to the Callum Coleman-Jones scenario.
Look, CJ, once again, we've sort of haven't actually worked our way through this, but look, for us, he's a required player. He's requested a trade to the Kangas, which is disappointing, but we look forward to receiving pick one and coming back our way. So.
That was just as good in replay as it was live last night.
How good is that? I mean, Damien Hardwick being able to have a laugh about Coleman Jones is great, and Jack Riewoldt did it as well with you last week. I think they understand, as much as they'd love to keep him, he's going to North Melbourne. That 4-year deal is on the table. We know Gold Coast are offering 5 years. They'll have to work out a trade. But what this means for other key forwards that are around the market is very interesting. It means Sam Wiedemann probably doesn't have a suitor because North Melbourne's gone for Coleman Jones. It means Gold Coast isn't a suitor for Sam Wiedemann because they've gone for Mabior Chol. And Rory Lobb is sort of in limbo in some ways, even though he's contracted at Freo for another 2 years. So what North Melbourne and Gold Coast have done has a flow-on effect for other key forwards looking for a new home.
So it was interesting that, so it was facetiously said pick one, but Richmond wants something proper from Coleman Jones, who they've always had a big opinion of and are quite, while understandable, they are disappointed to be losing.
That's right. And what he's worth is in the eye of the beholder. Clearly, they're not going to get pick one, but North Melbourne would want to offer more than pick 20, I think, for Richmond, even if it is pick 20 and then something else down the track. I think Richmond clearly want another first-round pick. They've got a great draft hand already, the Tigers. The Jack Higgins trade last year worked for them. Although Chol might be cancelled out with Robbie Tarrant, so they don't get the free agency compensation, they're in a really good position, the Tigers, to rebuild quickly and have another go next year with maybe 4 or 5 top 25 picks in this year's draft.
Question from the text, are the Tigers 100% out of the race for Chera?
Only, they're as far out of the race as I think any other club are as far out of the race. So you can't say 100% because there can always be a late change. But my understanding with Chera is that Carlton is still the club, and that's because Melbourne can't get him done. I can't imagine, Jared, a situation where Robbie DeRazio and Paul Connors, his managers, allow him to nominate a club that he can't get to.
Yep.
He will nominate a club he can get to, and at the moment that's Carlton. Even though Melbourne has had a serious crack, there's no draft picks they can offer. Even next year's first-round pick will likely be in the teens based on this year's form, and they're not going to be giving Luke Jackson or any players up either.
So the question that comes as a follow-up on Coleman Jones is, could North walk him to the pre-season draft?
Theoretically, yes. And that's what happened last year with Jackson Haitley and Adelaide and GWS. In the end, the two parties couldn't come to an arrangement, and the Giants thought it was more important to stick a flag in the ground and make a statement than it was to get a third rounder back for Jackson Hately. So they allowed him to go. I think Coleman Jones has probably got a higher ceiling than Jackson Hately, so I think they'll be less keen to do that, but it's still an option for North Melbourne. It has probably not bad bargaining power.
Frank's raised a name that I know is on your list today. Where's Jake Riccardi going? And there's a kicker to this from Frank, to the Bombers, right?
Well, the Bombers was the rumour, but I think he's going to sign a 2-year deal at GWS. It's been on the table. That's what they're working towards. It's not official yet. I think Matthew Flynn will also sign a 2-year deal at the Giants. And I checked in with the Giants this morning regarding Shane Mumford, because there's still been no retirement announcement.
Yeah.
And we think he's going to retire. We think it's highly likely, but it's not 100% certain yet. So there is still a very small possibility that Shane Mumford plays on, albeit pretty minor. And that would be amazing if he does.
Very good. Now, there's a simple swap here. We like 4-leggers and 5-leggers. It's like our multis.
I lost my multi. You got me on, Jared.
No, apologies for that. Gavin in Glenelga's got a straightforward. I see Laddams to the Giants and Finlayson to Port as a fair and beneficial swap for both parties.
That is an interesting one. If I can just talk about Peter Laddams for one moment. Now, last year, the Sydney Swans wanted Peter Laddams and Port Adelaide said no. This year, Port Adelaide have put him on the trade table. And I think that is a nice tactic from Port Adelaide to show the Sydney Swans and also show Jordan Dawson that they can get a trade done with a player involved as well. So they're offering up Laddams, saying, hey, you wanted him last year. Can we go again this year? And there we go, Jordan Dawson. We can get you to the club without having to give up too much in terms of draft picks. I think that is smart play from Port Adelaide. We know that Peter Laddams is contracted, but we also know the Swans were keen on him last year. So it has a fair bit of symmetry.
Yeah, there's always an underlying principle at play, isn't there? Good. The Touk Miller scenario at Gold Coast, what do you know on that front?
So he's contracted for next year, and Touk Miller is fundamentally a Gold Coast player for life. He said as much privately and publicly. He wants to be at the Suns forever, and I think that is a huge testament to him as a person. He's had a great year, All-Australian. They're best and fairest as well. But he's out of contract at the end of next year, and discussions have been ongoing for about 4 or 5 months regarding extending him for about 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years as well, more likely 4 or 5 years. And he wants about $850 to $880 a year. That high 800 is what his management's asking for, which I don't think you can argue that that's not fair given how important he is to the Suns and his loyalty. But the Suns at the moment are offering about $750,000. So there's a bit of an impasse. That will get resolved. He'll re-sign, but it just gives you an indication that at the to and fro for these really good players at clubs like the Gold Coast Suns that deserve good money, but the Suns also have in the back of their head, well, next year they want to keep Jack Lukosius. Next year they want to keep Isaac Rankin and Ben King. So they can't be offering Touk Miller everything because then that might ruin their list build elsewhere. So he's going to re-sign, but there's still a bit of a gap at the moment.
Will North chase Daniel Talia now that Tarrant has requested a trade and Talia's only 29 or 30? That's Andrew in Whittlesea.
Not that I'm aware of for North Melbourne and Daniel Talia. My information about Daniel Talia is there would be interest from elsewhere, but he's more likely to stay in South Australia because his partner has a job that is well paying and a new job, and he potentially has career opportunities outside of football that would set him up for the rest of his life. So although he would be wanted at another club, it might be the best thing for him to do for the next phase of his life to actually stay in South Australia and retire from football. That's how it looks at the moment.
Yep. All right. Luke Dunstan last night was on Sports Day. Really a revealing interview. So he had a great night at the Brownlow, and we remarked yesterday morning the backdrop is that he's not wanted at the Saints, and he put a bit of detail around how that's unfolded.
At times, certain coaches and that get opinions of players, and once they have opinions, it's pretty hard to change them. So, I mean, it's been pretty tough, I guess, mentally over the last couple of seasons, just having to work so hard to get back into the team and then to play some good footy and then be dropped for the last round was, it was pretty disappointing. And for me, it's probably just about being in a happy environment where, I guess you feel valued as a player and as a person and just feel a part of something, I think would be the biggest thing.
Did you not feel a part of something at the Saints? Did you not get on with Rats? Did he not rate you?
I wouldn't say I didn't get on with him. I mean, he's a good fella, and I just think, I think it's pretty clear that he didn't rate me, which is fine. That's what I said. It's hard to change opinions of coaches, and that's footy. So I'm not holding that against anyone. But yeah, as I said, I think I just need a fresh start and a bit more, clean slate, and I'll sort of find a bit more motivation.
Who might believe in Luke Dunstan?
I think Essendon is the club that might believe in Luke Dunstan. This is still very early. I'm not saying that there's even been a formal approach, but Essendon has told player managers in the past couple of months they're after an inside midfielder. Luke Dunstan comes cheap. He got 11 Brownlow votes. Just on his time at St Kilda, he sought clarity before the start of the season. Am I in your plans? Brett Ratton said, no, you're not in our best team. We don't think you're going to play senior football this year. He played some VFL footy. He got in the team. He finished really well, although he got dropped for the last game of the season. I think there's no doubt that Luke Dunstan can play, but there is, as we've spoken about before, and Sam Edmund has spoken about as well, there is an abundance of inside midfielders that are looking for new homes that pre-COVID would have been able to find it, but post-COVID with list spots tight and not much money, it's a lot harder for this sort of player to find a new home. The Gold Coast Suns have some interest in Luke Dunstan, maybe as a rookie, but I think Essendon is the club that he's most likely to get to if he's going to get to another club at all.
Okay. Jeff from Wavell, he's tagged his a scoop. Saw Talia getting a season pass for the Unley Pool on the weekend. He's staying in Adelaide. See, this is Trade Bell. This is right at the core of Trade Bell material.
Thank you,
Tom.
Jeff. That's very good. Well, I think that's more likely to happen, as I said.
This had come through. Could you please ask Tom, why would Narkle only sign for 1 year, given his age and promise? Wouldn't the Cats have liked to lock him away for 3, if not 4? That's Gurav.
Well, the Cats may have wanted to, but I think Narkle is keeping his options open. If he has another year where he can't quite break into the team, then his manager, Ralph Carr, and him will be looking elsewhere, as they did this year, it must be said. So I think this is almost like a last chance saloon for the Cats to prove to Narkle that they want to keep him, but also Narkle to prove to the Cats that he's good enough to be in their best 23.
You wrote a story about Jordan Clark on the weekend while we were doing crunch time. In fact, that landed. What's the latest on Clark?
Yeah, so he had a meeting with Justin Longmuir and Fremantle last Wednesday. He's in Perth. He's a Western Australian, and he was there, obviously, for Geelong's finals campaign. And there's an expectation now from the Cats and also from Clark's camp that there will be discussion this week that will explore a possible trade. It doesn't mean he's going to walk in there and bang his hand on the table and say, I want a trade. It doesn't mean Geelong's going to say, you need to get out and look for a trade because he's got another year in his contract. But I think there's going to be a mature discussion in which a trade is explored, and Fremantle is the logical home for him.
I don't want you to leave without having the full fantasy experience, okay? So Marty from Geelong has sent this through for your contemplation. Grundy traded for a high round 1, round 2 draft picks. Frees up $900,000 in cap space and not in premiership window for 5 years. Max Lynch to be the number 1 ruck, extra draft points to secure Nick Dacos and maybe an emerging key forward. I want the full fantasy experience.
Okay, I'll give you the full fantasy experience on this. It reads quite well for Collingwood, but no one has the money to pay Brodie Grundy. And I can't imagine a club, any club, let alone Collingwood, paying $300,000 a year for Treloar for the next 4 years and then also paying a portion of Grundy's contract to be elsewhere. So I love it, but I can't see Brodie Grundy going anywhere on the salary that he's on.
And MK in Perth wants you to run the eye over DeGoey to Freo for Chera or pick 6.
Not that I've heard, Jared. I haven't heard that one. Every time I've asked about DeGoey, because he's out of contract at the end of next year,
Yep.
The answer I get back is that he's a required player at Collingwood, and you can see why, given the way he finished the season. He's a pre-agent, so he does have some sort of currency on the market, but I can't see that happening to Freo.
What have you got coming up on Fox Footy, Tom, particularly with an eye toward, is it Friday?
Yes, Friday. What we love at Fox Footy, Jared, you know this, is pushing the boundaries and doing things slightly differently. And what we're doing on Friday is broadcasting the captain's runs for both teams. So the Western Bulldogs and Melbourne from about midday or thereabouts. So it'll be Brad Johnson and Sarah Jones and Dermot Brett and Jordan Lewis and myself involved. And we'll be broadcasting the captain's run exactly as it sounds. We'll have, I think, 4 or 5 cameras at the venue. Kath Lochnan will be there with Matthew Pavlich. And if you support either of those two teams, or if you don't, tune in and just watch a training run, because that's what we're most interested in the day before. Charlie Spargo's ankle and Stephen May's hamstring.
Yep. It is that how to stay connected to it when it's a long way away. It's a great idea. Terrific. Good on. Thanks for accepting the Trade Bell invitation. Well, I think you're unscathed as you leave.
God, I'm a bit nervous. We'll see how we go. I I certainly feel like Sam M does a great job, but if I can do half the job he does, then I'll be happy.
Good man. Tom Morris. So the captain's runs on Fox Footy, so 5:04 on Friday. Fox Footy senior AFL reporter Tom Morris. David texts through, right on both counts, Tom. Sam does a brilliant job and you're a fine sub. Deserve a medal. David from Newport tying together our medical sub conversation in the trade bell there. Nicely done. You can see Tom on AFL tonight and the whole Fox Footy team from 2 p.m. grand final day on channel 504 on Foxtel.
Making stupid, pedantic rulings and be influenced by social media in trying to shape your game, then you're going to end up with this. And the top coaches and the top players and the top referees will make a mockery of you the closer you get to the big games. And there were a number of instances on the weekend where players made a mockery of the rules. Everyone thinks I'm a whinger and everyone thinks I'm complaining for the sake of it. I don't. I'm trying to help the bloody game. How often this year have we seen trainers running on and stopping the game? It's been a blessing because the score's been 50-0 a lot of the times and we wanted the game to stop. We were sick of watching it, all right? But we've allowed it to go on to the point at a crucial game in a final, our most important game last year, Pete Green runs on the field. Ooh, stop. Oh, he's got to stop. Why? Well, you're not going to bend in his shoe or something. I don't know.
Phil Gould howls at the moon. It's a special category. It was worthy of repetition today. Channel 9's 100% footy last night after the Panthers and the Eels. A contentious, thrilling finish, scoreless second half. Vossi was calling that. Andrew Voss, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Jared. Yes, and I should clarify for our listeners, I had the great pleasure and great fun working with Gus Gould for more than a decade at the Channel 9 network. I think if I was to tally up all the arguments I had and disagreements on issues, probably weighed at about 45% of the time I agreed with him, 55% of the time we disagreed. Gus loves being challenged. And he loves an argument. He loves a debate. So there's a fair bit of theatre in him too. He's the pantomime actor. You know, the bloke behind the star up the front.
Yep.
And the crowd say, look behind you, look behind you. And when he turns around, Gus is gone. And then he comes back from behind the curtain. That's Phil Gould. That's the character Phil Gould is. He got a roll on that. There's a fair bit of truth in what he said, mind you. But let's not try to escape the issue here, Jared. And it's the same in the AFL. Coaches are cheats. Coaches bend the rules. That's part of their modus operandi, is to bend the rules. We put rules in place. Who else do you blame here other than the coaches? They exploit things. That's what they do.
So this was a trainer running out onto the ground when an injury, your call of it was quite brilliant. He must have imagined the injury from a long way away and got straight out on the ground to get the pause that the Panthers desperately needed.
Yeah, he didn't actually get on the field, so he's diagnosed from a distance. Now, I won't exaggerate. The player was the grandstand side of the post. So I suppose if I was to put out a line, he's 20 metres away. A rugby league field is 66 metres wide, so he's at least 20 metres away. The player was not writhing in agony. It was at a key point in the game. Parramatta on the attack, peppering the Panthers line, and the Panthers trainer runs up to the trainer and just says, stop the game, look. And they did. And momentum lost. I mean, who's at fault here? No, Penrith are at fault here. It's not the rules. It's exploitation of it. And this particular trainer, had actually been served a breach notice earlier in the year. So he has a little bit of form in that department. It's a tactical move. They're not the only club to do it. It happens. Yes, we've created rules that enables it to happen. But when it actually is executed, it has to be blamed on the team and the coach, does it not the rule itself, I would think.
There are such commonalities across codes all the time, Vossi, and this is absolutely one of them. Now, yesterday, back page of the Daily Telegraph, Cam Munster, I know everyone is death riding us to lose this week. Hello, Sydney.
Oh, look, I don't know. Look, that's just it makes a great headline, of course, and of course you're going to put it in black and white, bold print. Cam, I don't think that's 100% correct. Look, it's an interesting one because if you were to just isolate and say that's a Sydney versus, Victorian club that perhaps, Sydney is throwing its support behind the Sydney club, I don't know whether Penrith are exactly the flavour of a month, if you like. You know what I mean? That they were last year. They were a better feel-good story last year. This year, there have been times where people have criticised them because they've said they were arrogant. And, some of their celebrations and what have you, some of their players get up in the face and, rub the head of the player the defender after they've scored a try. And that doesn't go down well with a lot of fans. So there's not as much love for Penrith this year. So I don't know whether people are automatically jumping on the Sydney club because they are playing Melbourne. I think the true rugby league fan, maybe I'm taking a little bit too much licence here, Jared, but you do appreciate what Melbourne, how they play and the stars they have. And watching Brandon Smith play is fantastic. And Ryan Pappenhausen and Cameron Smith and Justin Olam and Addo Carr, and it goes on. I think there is an appreciation for the skill, but maybe it's just ingrained in us that we don't have to like Victorians, you Mexicans, you bastards.
Now, the other element I really like is that the Panthers have put forward a proposal for a gentleman's agreement with the Storm that we won't milk penalties in the preliminary final. How convenient, Vossi. How convenient.
Please, as if that's going to happen. Come on. Look, when the GOAT, when we're talking the Messiah, Cameron Smith said earlier this year, we went down this path at State of Origin, that, players won't stay down for a penalty. Cameron Smith, games record holder, arguably greatest player of all time, said, what, you're telling me at 12 all, 2 minutes to go, you're not going to stay down if you feel a little touch around the head? Of course you're going to stay down. So there's no gentleman's agreement. Gentleman's agreement is a cliche. It's crap. Doesn't work in real life. In the heat of battle, when things are on the line, it's going to happen. And we had a case the other day where Blake, if you touch your neck, we call it the crusher tackle, you hold your neck, the referee blows the whistle, blows a penalty. The moment he heard the whistle, he jumped straight up and went to fight the player who'd tackled him. Like there was no injury. It's a blatant act of acting, and it's not in the spirit of the game. But again, do you blame the rule or do you blame the player? No, the player is the one who did that. We should be charging him.
Bossy, good form this morning. Well done across our great divide.
Melbourne to win. I just said it quietly.
Don't tell anyone out loud on 1170. Andrew Voss, who hosts the breakfast show in Sydney on SEN. We reach across the divide on Tuesdays.